Hi folks, it is the Nutty Knife Guy. Tad late on this video, sorry about that. What can I say? Life. Now, I had promised that this video would be a review of a budget camp knife from Tractor Supply, but I slightly re-injured my already injured leg. Excuse me. And I'm under doctor's orders to stay off it as much as I possibly can. So I decided to do kind of an indoor video this week, more on the lines of general discussion than a review. In a second, I'm going to throw my leg up on a stool here because that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay. All right. Now, I was talking about knife collection to a non-knife person on a non-knife related chat room. It just kind of came up in the course of discussing other things, and it was actually a history forum about the Middle Ages, and we were talking about different weapons in the Middle Ages and how TV gets them wrong. And the subject of fighting knives came up, and what happened was we were talking about what makes a fighting knife a fighting knife. Now, technically, any knife you fight with is a fighting knife because it's a knife and you're fighting with it. But we're talking about knives specifically designed for fighting. But it's not that clear cut, is it? Because now we have tactical knives, we have combat knives, and we have survival knives, all of which have at least some design elements for fighting. And I don't think that there's a real definition of a fighting knife, of a tactical knife, of a camp knife, of a survival knife. So I wanted to put it to the people on YouTube, and this time I will remember to upload the BitChute. Keep forgetting to do that, but okay. So we'll just talk about what exactly makes a fighting knife. Now, it's muddled even more because if you go on a lot of websites, particularly Amazon, nobody wants to call a fighting knife a fighting knife. They'll call it a tactical knife. They'll call it a hunting knife. They'll call it a Bowie knife when it isn't, just to avoid it and calling it a fighting knife. So I'm going to go into what I consider to be the attributes of a fighting knife. And here it is. Let me grab one. Now, I'm going to use this one as my first example because this is something I designed. I drew out the specs and sent schematic drawings and had this made by the good people over at Kukri House in Nepal. And I designed this as a fighting knife. That's all I intended it to be used for. Now, I did a video on this and tested it as for camp functions because you'll never know. And yes, you could use this for a lot of camp functions. Not particularly good. It's not particularly good at that, but it can happen. You can do some chopping with it. You can do some fine work. But I designed this as a fighter. It's got a very acute point. It's thick. It does have a broad enough blade to be a decent cutter, but it's more of a thruster than a cutter. It's got a sub hilt for retention. It's got a hilt that sticks out a little bit for a skull crusher and a hook on everything like that. This was my idea of a quintessential fighting knife. I based it on a book that I wrote called The Blessed Warriors, a knife in that book. It's a fighting knife. Okay, that's definitely a fighting knife. Now I'm going to lean over here and get another one. This is a Gil Hibben tactical assault knife. Every time I bring this knife up, I use the air quotes for tactical, because there's nothing tactical about this. It's bright and shiny, right? It's not really good for chopping or prying or anything. And a tack knife should be able to do that. You should be able to pry open like windows and stuff with it, and you can, but it's not really good for this. Now, granted, this is really meant more of a display knife, but I did do uh, uh, a video where I actually used this knife, and it came out quite well. I didn't even scratch the blade, and I was chopping with it and banging up against wood and doing all kinds of things with this thing. But in my mind, this is a fighting knife. I'll go back to this one. This one it's got a fighting guard. It's got a good overlay in the handle, and so does this one. It's got a fighting guard. What I call is full hand protection, or at least partial hand protection up here and full down here. It's got to have a good solid guard, in my estimation, to be a fighting knife. But again, this one is not good for anything else. More or less. Like I said, you can press it into the surface, but it's not what it's meant for. All right. And then we have, where'd it go? I had it. I know I did. This M-TEK. Now, when I bought this on Amazon, it said outdoor knife. But this is a fighter. It's got the guard, it's got the fight it, it's got the sub-hilt, it's got a good overlaying on the handle, the puña, as the Filipinos would call it. But this really does have virtually no camping. You could probably chop with it because it's got a nice record, but that's made for cutting. It's got an online point for thrusting. Right. The spine, I don't know if you can tell how thick the spine is. I'll get it in the frame here, honest. I don't know if you can tell how thick the spine is, but it's not. Its thickness is through the center. If you try to baton with this thing is so narrow, it would just chew up your wood. This is the M-TEK 4080, I think it is, model 480. And granted, it's an M-TEK too, so it's 440 stainless steel, and it seems to be a pretty good 440 stainless steel. But if you take this out in the field and tried to do any kind of bushcraft with it, it would fail because that's not what it's for. On the other hand, if you did decide to use this as a personal protection tool, it would probably come out quite well. Now, I got to stretch over here again and see if I can get hold of one more. Be right back. That's the one. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I should have had these. I thought I could reach them after I got my leg up, and I couldn't. But here it is. And then we have the Ontario SP6. Now, Ontario actually has the guts to call this a fighting knife. They call it the SP6 Fighter, right? And it even says SP6 Fighting, or is it Fighter? Fighting on the blade. I give the points for that. The sheer honesty in the face of all the political correctness and social justice shenanigans. Okay. But this is very similar to the tactical assault knife in profile and in length. It's much lighter. The Gil Hibben is much heavier, but they're similar. Okay, so we're looking at a blade of between about 11 and 12 inches here overall, and a knife of right, with a decent sized handguard and a longer grip and a fighting knife, right? Well, but the problem is the Bowie knife. Now, there are a lot of things out that they say are Bowie knives that aren't. Uh, that's just a fact. All right. So when most people think of a Bowie knife, they think of something like this. This one is the Timber Rattler, uh, Daniel Boone Bowie knife. And I did a review on this one too. There's no reason to think that Daniel Boone ever carried a knife like this, but it's a nice looking knife, and it's quite well made for a budget knife. But it's a little longer than the other fighting knives. It does have the guard, and it does have a nice acute point to it. Now the thing of it is this: this knife you could go camping with, and it would pretty much do everything you needed it to do. You could baton with it, you could do kitchen prep with it, you could skin game with it, you can just do all the bushcraft stuff with it. The thing is this: Bowies, all Bowies, stem from the Bowie knife that Jim Bowie had designed, were intended as fighting knives. He fought duels with these things, you know. So you can go into the whole sandbar fight and how after that fight he developed the Bowie knife. Now, granted, the history there is kind of mixed in with the Bowie myth, but essentially the thing is, this thing was designed as a fighting knife, and it'd be very effective as a fighting knife because you can chop with it as well as slice and thrust. These other ones, you're not going to get much out of a chop. They don't have the weight in the blade. The thing of it is, designed as a fighting knife, but nobody really thinks of a Bowie knife as a classical fighting knife. They think it as kind of the knife that won the West, the general purpose knife that you can defend yourself with in a pinch. They think of something like this now is what most people think of as a fighting knife. I would call this a dueling fighter. This pretty much is something that you would fight close quarters with against another human being. If somebody, in some bizarro world, somebody challenged me to a duel and I wanted to look good while in a knife fight, it would be this knife. But what are the attributes of a fighting knife? What makes a fighting knife a fighting knife? What makes a combat knife a combat knife? Now, I don't have the classic K-Bar Marine knife. Call that a combat knife. Marines love it. Even the Army guys love it, even though they might not want to admit it. Right? Fantastic knife. But they call it, sometimes people call it a combat knife, a fighting knife, but usually they call it a combat knife because it's also very useful as a camp knife if you're bivouac somewhere, if you're a Marine or you're a soldier and you're bivouac somewhere. You can, back in the day, you would open your C rations with it. You would pry open crates with it and things like that. It's used as a camp knife, but also has good attributes as a fighter. So are combatant knives and fighting knives the same thing? And then you have things like, do I have something like that? Something like that handy? Do I? Most of my collection's off camera to the right. And if I didn't have to have my leg up like this, I would be able to get to them much easier. And then you have this boot knife. This is a United Cutlery Secret Agent, I think it's called. Double-edged. This is a dagger. Right? Almost certainly simply used for fighting, but this is more of a last-ditch weapon. If you were going to fight another person with who had a knife or other impact weapon, a tire iron or a baton, whatever, this is not the knife that you would go to first. You would get one of the other ones, something like the others I just showed you. But it is designed for fighting, so it's a fighting knife. And I realize that this is kind of rambling here, but as I said, I'm kind of interested to see and to hear what you guys think. Right? Is there a definitive set of parameters, of attributes for defining fighting knife, combat knife, tactical knife? I mean, there's a lot of overlap there. Are they all the same thing? Right? And then you have camp knife, survival knife, bushcraft knife, right? Are they all the same thing, or are they different? Are they different? Knife guys want to know. So it's going to be keeping it short. Like I said, I wanted to get outside and actually do some knife stuff with my Barnstar, aka Tractor Supply, survival knife, but it wasn't in the cards this week. So I just thought I'd put this up really quick and see if anybody out there has any ideas. Now myself, I consider a fighting knife, you know, like I said, this one I designed, my Blessed Warrior here. This is what I would, you know, call a classic fighting knife. Again, a cut and thrust, and you know, they can both cut and thrust. A full guard. Actually, if I were to do this again, I would actually extend this out more, but this is my idea of a fighting knife. It's not much good for anything else. I couldn't take this camping. Or is it something more like the XP6, which you could probably quite successfully go do light camping, light bushcraft with this, but it is designed as a fighter. The company even calls it a fighter. Again, kudos to Ontario for being honest. Right. Or is a fighting knife something larger that can actually do some chopping and do some hewing? Right? Or could there be more classifications of fighting knives? Because I think, you know, with swords there's Oakeshott. And for European swords, the Oakeshott is the guy that will tell you, you know, he's got all these classifications, and I'm not an expert on it, but, you know, he's got a Type A blade and a Type E Claymore with a Type C blade and all this other stuff. It's really complicated. I read his book, and I need to read it again and take notes so I know so I understand it better. Do we need to do something with that, like that, with knives? You know, I mean, a clear-cut definition of what a fighting knife is, what attributes it has, what a survival knife is, what a camp knife is, what a bushcraft knife is. You get my meaning? Let me know in the combats. Yeah, we're going to duke it out. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think is a good? We're going to concentrate on fighting knives. What do you think is an attribute for a fighting knife? What do you think it has to have? What do you look for in a knife that is meant for fighting other human beings? You know, as I said, now me, I think that 11 to 12 inches long is optimum for a true fighting knife. It's got to have a solid guard. I actually should have designed this one with a longer one. Actually, I did, and they really didn't do that when they made it. But other than that, it's great. I did a review on it. But they did kind of drop the ball on this over the drawings I sent them. But it is a cut and thrust. This one is probably about 60% thrust, 40% cut. But it's a cut and thrust knife. Full guard. It's got to have overhang on the handle. Right. Its thickness primarily should have a diamond cross section. That's a big one. That's one of the things that I think fighting knives should have. Thickness through the center, not the spine. Right? But what do you guys think? What attributes make a fighting knife? Right? And if you want to go into it, yeah, go ahead and you know, define all the classes, all the different types of knife. What do you need to do with a survival knife? My personal definition of a survival knife is that if you were out in the deepest, darkest wilds and you had to pretend you were Les Stroud or Bear Grylls and you were stranded and you didn't have a camera crew with you to help, if you were in a survival situation out in the middle of nowhere in any environment, in my mind, the survival knife, if you should be able to perform all the bushcraft and survival tasks, and with that as your only tool. That's my definition of a survival knife. But like I said, we'll concentrate on fighting knives. What do you guys think are the attributes that are a must-have in a knife that you're going to fight other human beings with? Right? If you were going to design the perfect fighting knife. So that's going to, like I said, I'm going to keep this quick since I couldn't get outside. And this is kind of rolling around in my demented brain. That's why they call me the Nutty Knife Guy. I think about knives a lot. Please, let me know in the comic books. I cannot say comment section today. Let me know in the comment section. What do you think about that? Please like, share, and subscribe if you find me at all entertaining or informative. And with that, I bid you draw your knives only in just purpose, and sheathe them only with honor. And remember that without knives, life would be dull and pointless. I bid you good night.